Imagine sitting in a crowded airplane, ready for takeoff, when suddenly a heated argument erupts in the aisle. A flight attendant, clearly agitated, pushes and yells at a prominent figure, none other than a Black Supreme Court judge. It's the kind of situation that raises eyebrows, but this one takes an unexpected twist. One phone call changes everything, sending shockwaves throughout the plane and bringing it to a grinding halt. What led to this shocking confrontation? Was it just a moment of stress, or something deeper brewing beneath the surface? The judge, known for their calm demeanor and integrity, was suddenly at the center of an explosive situation, all while passengers around them watched in disbelief. The tension was palpable, and no one could have predicted how quickly things escalated. But here's the kicker. Just when you think it's over, the story takes a turn. After the call, things spiral out of control. The plane, once set to soar through the skies, is grounded, leaving everyone on board to wonder what happened, who made the call, and what consequences will follow. The events that unfolded raise questions about power, respect, and the unexpected ways people react under pressure. And the shocking outcome is something you won't see coming. Stick around to find out how this dramatic incident turned an ordinary flight into a national headline. As the plane taxied down the runway, the tension in the cabin was thick, and it wasn't just because of the delayed departure. The Supreme Court judge, Dr. Elaine Carter, had been quietly seated in her first-class seat, trying to relax after a hectic few days in Washington. She was no stranger to attention, having spent years in the public eye for her groundbreaking decisions. But today, her composure was put to the test in a way she hadn't expected. The flight attendant, a young woman named Jessica, had seemed calm at first. But as the minutes passed, it became clear that something was off. A simple request for a drink escalated into something much bigger. Jessica had snapped, her voice raised louder than necessary as she insisted on standing over Dr. Carter, her tone unmistakably condescending. The judge, usually patient and diplomatic, tried to diffuse the situation with a calm word. But when Jessica ignored her, then shoved past her to attend to another passenger, it became more than a simple misunderstanding. The surrounding passengers were stunned. They had witnessed minor conflicts on flights before, but nothing quite like this. Whispers rippled through the cabin, and some passengers pulled out their phones, discreetly recording what was happening. But this wasn't just a flight gone wrong. It was an event that had the potential to snowball into something much larger. A few rows back, an older man in a suit, who appeared to be on his phone, quickly dialed a number. His voice was low, almost urgent as he spoke, the words muffled but the tension unmistakable. He was making a call that would change everything. What did he know? Why did he feel the need to intervene? As Dr. Carter looked around, a chilling realization began to set in. This wasn't just about her. Something much bigger was at play. As the plane sat on the runway, Dr. Carter's thoughts raced. She had been in countless high-pressure situations, courtrooms, boardrooms, interviews. Nothing had prepared her for this. The interaction with Jessica had felt too personal, too loaded. She tried to brush it off, but the look in the flight attendant's eyes told her this wasn't just a simple service error. Jessica's anger was palpable, and there was something behind it that Dr. Carter couldn't quite place. Meanwhile, the older man who'd made the call had settled back into his seat, his eyes scanning the cabin with an unsettling calmness. His name was Robert Langley, a former government official with ties to powerful networks. He had been observing the situation carefully, taking note of Dr. Carter's composed demeanor, as well as Jessica's increasingly erratic behavior. Langley knew exactly what this confrontation could mean, not just for the flight, but for the larger picture. He had seen this type of tension before when issues of race, power, and authority collided in public spaces. Langley had a vested interest in seeing the flight grounded, but his reasons were buried under layers of political strategy and personal history that only he truly understood. The passengers around them exchanged nervous glances, sensing something wasn't right. Some, like the young woman sitting by the window, had already captured parts of the confrontation on their phones. Her fingers hovered over the screen, wondering if she should post the video online. The idea of a viral moment was too tempting, but there was a feeling of unease that stopped her. What if this went further? What if this became a story bigger than any of them could control? In the cockpit, the flight crew was unaware of the storm brewing below them. The plane's captain, a seasoned pilot named Marcus Reed, had already received an unexpected message from air traffic control. He hadn't been told everything, but the tone was enough to make him pause. Something about the situation on board was escalating, and it was causing more than just a delay. The decision was made. The plane would not take off until the situation was resolved. But what exactly was going on? The confusion weighed heavily on his mind as he glanced out the cockpit window, unsure of what the next few minutes would bring. The minutes dragged on, and the cabin was thick with anticipation. The air seemed to pulse with tension, each passenger sensing the gravity of what was unfolding but unsure of what exactly it meant. Dr. Carter's mind raced as she tried to maintain her composure, her fingers gripping the armrest, her heart pounding in her chest. What had she walked into? The strange, angry interaction with Jessica hadn't felt like a coincidence, and now with the phone call made, the situation seemed to be spiraling out of control. She had never been one to back down from a challenge, but this felt different. Something told her that she was at the center of a much larger storm. Robert Langley sat back in his seat, his eyes never leaving the scene around him. He knew how quickly the narrative could shift in moments like this. He had orchestrated too many moves behind closed doors to let an opportunity like this slip by. The judge's reputation, her presence, it would be impossible to ignore. If things went his way, the story would erupt across news outlets, and the world would be watching. But if it didn't go as planned, there could be consequences that no one could predict. Meanwhile, Jessica was growing more anxious. Her earlier anger had dissolved into something more dangerous, a sense of paranoia that made her feel like she was being watched. She kept glancing at the passengers, the ones who were recording her every move. Was this all just part of a bigger plan? The thought gnawed at her, but she couldn't let it show. Her role, whatever it was, had to be played out. At that moment, a sharp voice crackled over the intercom, and Captain Reed's voice, firm yet uncertain, cut through the tension in the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just received instructions to remain grounded for the time being. Please stay seated." The message was clear. Something was about to happen, and no one knew just how far this situation would go. As Captain Reed's voice echoed through the cabin, the tension reached a boiling point. The usual sounds of the plane, the hum of the engines, and the chatter of passengers all seemed to fade away as the weight of the announcement sank in. The sense of uncertainty was now shared by everyone on board, but what exactly was going on? Passengers shifted in their seats, trying to piece together the fragments of the situation. It was obvious something serious was happening, but no one was ready for the truth. Dr. Carter felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was no random flight delay. The events leading up to this moment, the flight attendant's sudden aggression, the strange phone call, and now the plane being grounded. Something bigger was at play, something deliberate. As her mind whirled with possibilities, a flash of recognition struck her. The call, the one that Langley had made. The pieces fell into place, but it was too late to act. Whatever had been set into motion was already in motion, and she was right in the middle of it. Then, as if on cue, the unexpected happened. Another voice interrupted the uneasy silence, this time coming from one of the flight attendants, but it wasn't directed at the passengers. The words were sharp, urgent, and carried an air of finality. "The plane's been grounded. No one is getting off until further notice." Suddenly, an armed security officer appeared at the front of the cabin, moving swiftly toward the first-class section where Dr. Carter sat. His presence sent a shockwave through the plane. The sight of him stirred whispers among the passengers, some tense, others confused. What did this mean? Why was security involved? Dr. Carter's pulse quickened. She could sense that the stakes had just escalated. Whoever had set this chain of events into motion wasn't done yet. The real question now was, Who was pulling the strings? And what did they want with her? The seconds dragged on, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. The security officer made his way down the aisle, his eyes scanning the cabin with steely focus. The atmosphere had shifted. What had started as a heated argument now felt like a ticking time bomb. Dr. Carter felt a knot tighten in her stomach as the officer approached, his gaze never leaving her. She had no idea what was about to unfold, but one thing was certain: this wasn't just about an in-flight disturbance anymore. The officer reached Dr. Carter's seat and paused, glancing down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, without a word, he pulled out a small device from his belt and handed it to her. It was a phone. "You'll need it on the ground, ma'am," he said quietly. Dr. Carter's confusion was palpable as she took the phone. Her fingers shook slightly as she held it to her ear, waiting for the other end to pick up. The voice on the other side was calm but unmistakable. "Judge Carter, we've been watching you. We know what's going on, and now it's time for you to make a decision." Her heart raced. This was not a coincidence. This was orchestrated, planned. She had walked right into it. But before she could respond, the line went dead, replaced by the hum of static. The officer stepped back, his posture relaxing as he gave a small nod, signaling that his job was done. But just as the tension seemed to lift, a final shock hit. Langley, the older man who had been quietly observing, stood up from his seat and turned toward the front of the plane. He locked eyes with Dr. Carter, a knowing smile crossing his face. "You're not the only one with a role to play," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, Dr. Carter understood. Langley wasn't just an observer. He was a player in a game far bigger than she had ever imagined. The stakes were higher than she thought, and the twists weren't over yet. The story was just beginning. The realization hit Dr. Carter like a bolt of lightning. Langley had been playing a game, and she had only been a pawn. The way he looked at her now, with that quiet confidence, made her blood run cold. She had thought this was about her, but she was only part of a much larger, more intricate plot. The phone call, the sudden security intervention, it was all connected. But why? And who exactly was pulling the strings? Before she could process any more of this, the intercom crackled again, this time with a much clearer message. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now clear to take off. All passengers are free to continue their journey." The plane slowly began to move down the runway, and the weight of the situation began to settle in. Dr. Carter sat back in her seat, her mind racing. Whatever had just happened, it was far from over. The game was still in motion. But as the plane ascended into the clouds, she realized something important. She was no longer just a judge on a flight. She was a player in a much larger world, one she hadn't fully understood until now. Langley's smile lingered in her thoughts, a quiet reminder of how little she truly knew. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter. What had begun with a simple confrontation on an airplane had revealed the first cracks in a vast, hidden network of influence and power. Dr. Carter wasn't sure where this would lead her, but she knew one thing for certain: she would never look at the world the same way again. And as the plane soared higher, she couldn't help but wonder, who else was out there, watching, waiting for their moment to make a move?